Uh, you know, uh, Sammy says your friends call you Dues. Is it okay if we call you Dues?
You call me dudes.
Yeah, let's
Okay,
do
so
it. Let's do
Dues,
it.
Dues, what do you think of the 49ers D line? You're a former D lineman. They drafted Mikael Williams in the first round out of Georgia. They took Alfred Collins in the second round out of
Mm-hmm.
Texas. They took CJ West in the fourth
West.
round
Yep.
out of Indiana. They got Bryce Huff,
Whew, that was
who,
big.
I'll say this though, watching him practice, he's a small guy, but then his get off is
He's so
spectacular.
explosive. He's
Yeah,
so
so
explosive.
explosive. How do you see the remade Niner defensive front around Nick Bosa?
So, Larry, I had some concerns going into this offseason. Obviously, they kind of gutted that defensive line. Malik Collins is out the door. Leonard Floyd was out the door. They kind of revamped what they wanted to do on defensive line. You could tell there's a heavy emphasis on stopping the run because they really struggled at doing that the last couple of years since D'Amico and Robert Saleh have been gone. The only thing that I question is some of the body types they drafted don't normally fit the scheme that Robert Saleh and Kris Kocurek, who is the defensive line coach, they don't typically fit what they want to do. Case in point, Mikael Williams is more of a 3-4 defensive end. And for people that don't know what that means, those are bigger body defensive ends. They kind of line up head up on the tackle instead of on the edge of the tackle. And that's what
Five
he did
technique.
exactly. And that's what he did at Georgia a lot. Right. And then there was times they kicked him inside over the guard and he rushed the passer as a 3 technique, which again, a 3 technique is the outside shoulder of the guard for people that don't know what that means. And then you get Alfred Collins, to me was one of the best run stuffing defensive tackles in this draft, but he's not like a get up the field, create havoc type of guy. And that's what that defense has been synonymous with, right? And then CJ West as well. I know they want to kind of compare him to DJ Jones, and the body types are similar, but DJ was a better athlete. I played with DJ his rookie year when I was in San Fran with Saleh. And DJ was a heck of an athlete, and that's why he continues to get paid, and that's why he just got paid again for the Denver Broncos, because even though he's a bigger body, he's got some wiggle, man. That big dude's got some wiggle, and he can rush the passer for a guy that's 320 pounds. So that's my biggest concern when I look at this defensive line. Like, they changed up the body type. Does that change up schematically what they want to do? Because this defense has always been run by the D-line, creating havoc up front. But the body types that you have now, it doesn't associate with you still running that scheme. Now, Bryce Huff, I thought, was a major signing because the last time he was with Saleh, he had double-digit sacks, and that's why he got paid by the Philadelphia Eagles. And when he went over to Philly, it was a schematic change for him, going from a 4-3 to a 3-4 outside linebacker, which wasn't something he was accustomed to doing, right? He's used to pinning his ears back and going forward, where, in Vic Fangio's system as the outside linebacker, you got to drop sometimes. And that's not what Bryce Huff does. So I think we'll get more of the production that we saw when he was with the New York Jets now that he's back with Saleh running that system. But my concerns are with a lot of the rookies that they took, that they're going to really be banking on to make plays early in the season. Is their body type, does it position them to have success in that scheme with Kris Kocurek and Robert Saleh?
Well, I want to jump in on one part of this, and obviously, Dues and Larry, I'm a Philly guy, and so the Huff thing is really fascinating to me. And Dues, and by the way, thanks everybody for liking and subscribing here. We're at Krug Show, we're at Thinking Out Loud, Siciliano and Sam on both of these pages. And Dues, thanks for being a huge part of this today. But my question is this, Dues, and you've done it. You obviously players change teams in this league. Most of them do. It's a natural. Well, for Huff to obviously have the impact that he did with the Jets, to get that money and show up in Philly. And it's not like that's a forgettable season in Philadelphia, right? I mean, this is a Super Bowl run by the Eagles that he is essentially not a part of at all. I mean, he's watching the Super Bowl like all of us on Super Bowl Sunday, instead of being a part of what is now considered a legendary defensive performance, not only through the entire season with Fangio, but specifically against Mahomes and the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. And you would think when the season starts, if you say, okay, Huff signs, the Eagles have the number 1 defense, and they beat Mahomes in the Super Bowl, you're thinking, wow, what an impact Huff had. And instead, he's making room for other guys to get in there. What exactly, what happens when you change? You're changing cities, you're changing teams. We talked about changing all of the scheme that he is in, but what is that like, and what's it going to be like for him now to be in a third setting with San Francisco?
So let me take you guys into the locker room schematic wise about Vic Fangio. And one thing I know about Vic, because I've talked to players that have been in the system, whether it's the Denver Broncos, the Miami Dolphins, the Philadelphia Eagles, is if he feels like you don't fit his system, there's no room for you. There's no room for you. And again, this is not a shot at Vic Fangio. And maybe going through OTAs and mini camp and camp, he thought Bryce Huff couldn't run his scheme the way or proficient enough to be out there on the field over a guy like Nolan Smith or Jalix Hunt. And I think that's what,
clearly, yeah.
And I think that's exactly what happened, right? Howie Roseman was looking at this like, we can bolster our pass rush. We're going to get rid of Hassan Reddick, who's older, and we're going to get younger with Bryce Huff. But Vic Fangio has a certain way he runs things. And if you believe in the system and you run it to the T that's running it, you get what happens in Philadelphia. You get a Super Bowl winning team, right? But I know for a fact, if he feels like you can't be part of the solution in this defense, you're not going to play. And that's just how he's always been. So going back to the second part of your question, Sam, now I think Bryce will be more comfortable because he's back in a familiar setting with a coach that essentially believed in him. Because what people may not know about Bryce Huff, he was an undrafted free agent like me. He literally had to work his way up and like earned everything with the Jets. And I love Robert Saleh, even to his detriment. At times, I don't believe he knew what Bryce Huff could really be, right? There was times where I feel like they undervalued him, right? And I'm not even saying letting him walk in free agency because he played so well that he paid himself out of New York. Like New York was not going to be able to pay him what he was going to get, which was I think 15 a year or even more than that. So, but there was times where I felt like he should have been the starter and they felt like he was just a pass rush specialist. But we've seen guys like Hassan Reddick or smaller defensive ends with their get off and explosive ability be able to play the run because they put the tackle in such a bind because of their get off that they have them off kilter and they can set a vertical edge. And I've seen Bryce Huff do that. So again, I think schematic wise, and I tell people this all the time, coaching and where you go matters. It really matters. Like people are so quick to say somebody's a bust or somebody doesn't fit our scheme. I had a coach once tell me, don't tell me what a guy can't do. What can he do? And let's highlight his attributes and what he can do. Like, I think that's a lost art in coaching a lot of times. And I think for Bryce Huff, going back to a Robert Saleh and a Kris Kocurek, who's going to get the best out of him, an attacking style defense, they're really going to benefit from his specific skill set.
You know, Dews, I asked Kocurek a few weeks ago. We had a chance to do some face-to-face with the coaches, and I really appreciate that. We get it a couple times a year, and I went right over to him and I said, hey, what happened last year with Huff? How do you explain the lack of production? And obviously, I saw the lack of snaps, but outside of the lack of snaps, explain the lack of production. You're watching the film. You wanted him. What are you seeing? And, he brought up a pretty good point. And the point was that, he's just basically saying different schemes. And basically, he said, hey, I thought this was the way that was interesting, though, the way he verbalized this. He was talking about the step sequencing as a stand-up guy in a 2-point stance, as a 3-4 outside backer, as opposed to hand in the dirt. And in Huff's case, he goes 4-point stance.
Yep, he puts both hands down.
He's a four. I mean, it even looks funny because you got Nick Bosa in a kind of an elongated like track 3-point stance.
Correct.
You got Huff in a real like tight right over the ball 4-point stance. But his get off is choreographed. It is incredibly fast. But that was Chris's argument that the step sequencing is quite a bit different in a 4-3 wide 9 get off the ball, get up the field scheme, as opposed to Fangio's 3-4. So occasionally you're going to drop. And he says that that's enough to throw off your rhythm and your advantage, especially for, and he didn't want to say it, but I'm sure he meant it, for an undersized rusher who needs a great get off to win.
100%. I'm so glad you brought that up, Larry, because now we're talking about the X's and O's and the details of pass rushing. Just imagine for your whole life, you've been in a certain stance and you've had so much production doing it. And then all of a sudden you go to a new team and they're like, well, we know that worked for you, but we don't want you to use that stance anymore. We want you to stand up in a 2-point stance, but we want you to have that same get off. No, it just doesn't happen. It's going to take a while for you to get used to being in that stance. And to KK's point, I call him KK because Kris Kocurek, that's his nickname, KK. He makes a really good point. Just like the step sequences and the details, and how you're setting up your rushes are totally different in a 2-point stance than they are in 3-point stance. Like in a 3-point stance, you may be able to get an extra step in a 2-point stance. You have to shorten up your stance or elongate them to set up counter moves. I actually saw Myles Garrett talking about this the other day because he'll mix it up and he'll line up in a 3-point stance and a 2-point stance, and he changes up his cadence. And when I say cadence, like the way he steps and maneuvers to set up the offensive line. So again, if you have never done something before and they ask you to do it, it's going to take a while for you to feel comfortable in that stance and to have that production that you're accustomed to doing. I think, again, that was part of the issue with Bryce going to Philly.